again to Finding Stillness in the Storm, Contemplation and Leadership Development. We are thrilled for you to be with us today for this conversation about what happens when leaders make space to reflect. And today we'll look at why the shift from reactive to creative leadership depends on contemplation and how that shift can transform the way we show up, the way we lead, and the way we live. Leading this conversation is Dave Schrader. Dave is a seasoned leadership advisor and a longtime partner at Leadership Circle, and he's one of my favorite people to have a conversation with. I've never left a conversation with Dave without feeling more centered and more inspired than when I entered it. For more than 40 years, Dave has supported senior and emerging leaders across industries, helping them strengthen their self-awareness, expand their consciousness, and lead in ways that inspire ownership, authenticity, and creative action. His work weaves together research in adult development, organizational systems, and mindfulness, all of which is grounded in a deep understanding of what makes leadership truly transformative. Plus, he has an uncanny ability to pull from memory the most perfect poem to capture a moment. And I think that's a skill you'll probably see on display today. So it's my pleasure to welcome Dave Schrader. Dave, thank you so much for joining us. We're really pleased to have you.
You're welcome. I'm a bit embarrassed listening to you read that thing. Oh my goodness. When you get to be 66, let me turn the music off here. When you get to be 66, nearly 67, you realize, dang, I've been at this a long time. And there's a lot you can do with a long time. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. I just wanted to comment on one of the chats that Hattie put in there, joining from Monroe, Georgia. Hello from Monroe, Georgia, Hattie. She says she's interested in stillness for myself, first and foremost. And how do we help participants of leadership development sessions become more comfortable with contemplation? I mean, you're really right on the nose with what I'm also looking for that, Hattie. A sense of deep inner stillness that comes and goes in this crazy world that we're in. And so that's the journey that I want us all to consider, to talk about, to share today. Let me say a few things about myself that Sarah didn't. I think that this idea of contemplation has actually been quite a lifelong passion for me, though nobody told me about that. That's what it was called until much later. But when I was 10 years old and my father was in Vietnam, we lived with my grandparents on Cape Cod. And that was back before Cape Cod became gentrified and very expensive. And it was full of fishermen and tradesmen and so forth who could afford to live there. And every day, my grandparents would take us on these long walks on some beach that was nearby, and they were all nearby. My favorite, though, were walking on the Wilderness Beach on the Atlantic Ocean in winter. There was something lonely and clean, and though I didn't know it then, but mystical in that experience that was calling to me somehow. And I think since then, I've always loved being in nature and moving at a slower pace, the slower pace of nature. Over the years, I've actually, and it sounds silly to say this perhaps, but I've found that trees are some of my best teachers. I can stare at trees for hours and just wonder, how do you stand there so nobly and give your gift of oxygen and take away our carbon dioxide and soak in the sun? And, just before the call, I was commenting to Crystal that I'm sitting here looking right over my camera at a beautiful maple tree outside my office that is bright orange and red. And as the wind blows, it's dropping its leaves. And I think, wow, that's a real lesson. So this may be where my love for contemplation and being present in this moment came to be. A couple other things to know about me. I'm married. It'll be 42 years in January to a woman named Andy, who is an artist and a certified Enneagram coach, and she's an international art retreat leader. She takes women to Wales and to Italy and to France, and they spend time doing art and eating great food. And Love it. And we've got 2 grown kids, and we have no cats. I don't know why that's important for me to say, but it just is. No offense to you guys who love cats. Um, and last thing is, in a leadership program that I lead regularly, I ask participants if you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, and have a long conversation with them, who would it be and why? And just by way of helping you to get to know me a bit, the person that I would love to hang out with is Hafiz. Hafiz was a near contemporary of Rumi, one of the other great Sufi poets from the 13th and 14th centuries. And I find that Daniel Ladinsky's translation of Hafiz poems is remarkably clear for this day and age and has given me so much guidance. So I'd love to hang out with Hafiz and pour him a glass of wine. My experience with Leadership Circle goes back to the very beginning, 2003, when the Leadership Circle profile was first introduced, and I was in the very first certification class in Bob Anderson's house in his living room. And he and I go back even further. We were friends. Bob Anderson, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is one of the 2 founders of Leadership Circle, Bill Adams being the other. And Bob and I have been friends since the 90s, before the Leadership Circle profile was even developed. We were doing some work together then. And you can get the rest of my credentialing stuff on LinkedIn if you care to. I'm assuming, Sarah, that my slides are showing. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. You just bumped to our purpose, to your second slide.
Great. So I want to share this with you. If you're not familiar with Leadership Circle, I assume that many of you are, but I know that some of you are not. It's important for you to get who we really are at the depths of our core. And this purpose statement lays it out. We created this right at the very front end of building the company. And I just want to read it to you and let it ring for you in whatever way it does. We exist. In and of itself, we could kind of stop there with that realization. We exist to evolve. We exist to evolve the conscious practice of leadership, to steward the planet, and to awaken us all to our inherent unity, to awaken us all to our inherent unity. Now, there's a lot in there. You know, you could see our business framework and model, the way we go to market, all of our tools and assessments are all built around helping to evolve the conscious practice of leadership. But it's for a bigger purpose than just increasing corporate profits or, corporate sustainability, although those are certainly in there, organizational performance. But it's to steward the planet. And I know that our planet is under siege from all kinds of environmental challenges, and we want to make a contribution to that too, in the very way in which we do our work and with the clients we choose to work with, and to awaken us all to our inherent unity. The idea there is that underneath it all, despite the look of separateness and the ways in which we practice othering in our world today, we actually are all connected. There's a prior unity that's before this illusion of separateness that we experience day to day. And it's there that we want to ground ourselves and our work. So that's what gets us up in the morning. All right, some expectations for today's call. One is I'd love to have us, I know we got a lot of people on the call, and I know we only have, a little more than 45 minutes. I'd love to have us experience a blend of explanation and experience. I mean, there's a big difference between experience and explanation. Sometimes we think that explanation is all we need, but direct experience of something like contemplation is important before the meaning of contemplation really lands for us. So we're going to start with a bit of an introduction to the need for contemplation in this world and in leadership. And then we're going to savor and reflect on one of my favorite poems by Judy Brown called Fire. And share a bit about our own contemplative practices if you have them. Then I'm going to lay out a little bit of my logic of my argument about contemplation and leadership and why it's critical for leadership and developing leaders. And we'll dig into each facet of that a bit more. And then we're going to finish with a very short guided meditation and contemplative moment, or a sit, as the Buddhists call it, And if that's not your thing, we're going to officially close the meeting before we do that, so you can drop off without feeling like you're, sneaking out. But if you'd like to hang out, it won't be a long sit, but I do want to lead you through a guided meditation and have us sit together in silence and experience that. So I really welcome conversation, comments, questions, yeah, buts. I don't really like lecturing to a lot of video squares with heads. And use the chat, as Sarah said, or put up your Zoom hand if you want to interrupt. All right. So, a few thoughts to set the stage. This is, starting with sharing a bit more about how we seek to fulfill our purpose statement here at Leadership Circle. And I think it's really relevant for everyone here on the call. The headline is that Leadership Circle, in our research, we've shown that vertical development, or moving through stages of progressively higher levels of consciousness and maturity, delivers quantum leaps in leadership effectiveness. It's actually dramatic what happens when people move from one level of awareness, one level of consciousness, one level stage of maturity to the next in terms of how they lead. And what I mean by that is our work with leaders is based on the groundbreaking work of adult developmental theory, which over the last 50 years has mapped the stages that adults move through as they mature and evolve. There's numerous theorists of adult development, and at Leadership Circle, we stand on the shoulders of all of these giants. Robert Kegan's work, most notably from his book, The Evolving Self, lays out 4 stages of adult development. What he calls the self-sovereign self. We actually have applied that version of the self to leadership. We call it egocentric leadership. The second stage in Kegan's work would be the socialized self, which we call reactive leadership. Then the self-authoring self, which we call creative leadership. And finally, the self-transforming self, which is called integral leadership. Since research shows that 90% of leaders spend their careers in some level of transition from the reactive to the creative types of leadership, we've designed our Leadership Circle profile to measure the specific ways that each leader we work with is embodying reactive and creative patterns in the way in which they lead. And at the heart of our work with leaders, the shift from the reactive stage to the next stage, creative, is one which clearly increases their effectiveness at leading. And it'll be obvious why in a moment. So a little bit about the reactive stage. This may be a review for some of you, but for others, it may be a new introduction to thinking about this way. In the reactive stage, leaders look outside themselves for guidance as to who and how they should be, should being in quotes or italicized or underlined. It's called reactive because we're reacting to the expectations of the surround we live and work in to form our sense of who we are and who we're supposed to be. I'm choosing those words deliberately because in the reactive stage, it's that all the people around us and their expectations who tell us who we are supposed to be as a leader, as an employee, as a citizen, as a family member. So, for example, by exercising our task-related willpower to get stuff done, GSD, leaders can seek to prove that they're someone who reliably makes things happen, to establish themselves as the doer, or by having the brightest intellect that serves up the best ideas and critiques what's wrong, they can seek to prove that they're the one who knows what's right and what works. And they establish their sense of credibility and authority based on that. Or by leaning into their heart center, they seek to be in relationship by being easygoing and nice and avoiding conflict. And they seek approval and the welcome of those around them so that they can belong. These are 3 essential reactive strategies that we all learn how to do, and we all do to some degree still. They serve us really well in the early years of our working career. We learn a lot of skills and strengths and gifts and abilities to get stuff done, to communicate our ideas, to be in relationship during that reactive stage. But it's full of shoulds of others' expectation. And so it kind of compels the reactive leader to constantly be scanning for others' approval and confirmation that they're okay. It's an external locus of control or external locus of self. And this vigilance that always scanning diverts a lot of energy from actual leadership and nearly always conveys the underlying truth that the leader's really leading as a way of shoring up their self-worth and security. So it's pretty much about them. Now, the creative stage. This is a major paradigm shift in how leaders think of themselves, how they experience themselves, and how they see the world. The shift to the later creative stage, I mean, it's a big deal. So true expansion of consciousness and a change in the nature of their self-understanding is what's happening here. No longer is the leader seeking to source their worth and their value from the social relationships around them. They're no longer seeking approval and continually trying to prove that they're okay. In the creative mindset, the leader's sense of their value is sourced internally, and therefore it's much more stable. This frees their leadership to be more about others' success, less about their own. Their impact begins to scale as well as they lead toward a vision and a purpose that's inspiring and inviting to others, that invites their colleagues to show up with their best energy and talents. This is why leadership scales so much more effectively from the creative mindset compared to the reactive, because it draws in so much more possibility and energy from the whole organization. So much of our coaching and development work, and yours as well, happens to be during the client's shift from reactive to creative ways of being. So, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dave, but I'm just wondering, should your slides be advancing? We're still on the few thoughts set the stage slide.
Should I have said maybe more than a few thoughts?
I just wanted to make sure if we were still meant to be there, if you were.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. No, we're good. We're good.
Okay, great.
So, coaching when we're working with leaders or, we're doing action steps, cognitive reframing of their evolving self, narrative identity shifting. I mean, it's all part of the powerful work that our practitioners coach their clients as they're evolving from reactive to creative. All right, here's the punchline. I believe, though, that there's a fundamental but commonly undervalued ingredient to this stage shift between reactive and creative. To my mind, there's something missing in nearly all the advice given to leaders these days, and its lack is unnecessarily keeping our clients from a deeper awareness of what's happening when they shift from reactive to creative. And that's the disciplines and practices of contemplation. So over the 40 years that I've worked with every level of organizational leader, I've watched our corporate fetish with speed and high performance grind the joy out of the most well-meaning and idealistic leaders. It's heartbreaking. Raising the bar, getting to the next level, dialing it up to 11 or that completely stupid 110%, relentlessly drives leaders to move faster, pack in more meetings per day, make decisions impulsively, see productivity as having no limits. I think it was Meta's or Google's motto for a while, which was move fast and break things. Seriously? How about think less, act faster? This modern idolatry of fast pace and schedule density has so undervalued reflection, wise consideration, restful recovery, wonder, and awe that most leaders feel that if they were to actually carve out regular space for deep thinking and listening, they'd be seen as slackers or lazy. I mean, it's rarely done. And yet, for thousands of years, diverse spiritualities, philosophies, and wisdom traditions that have placed contemplation at the heart of wise living and leading. It's considered to be the wellhead or fount of wise action. And so without it, we're probably thoughtlessly repeating routines and committing the same mistakes again and again. So I've come to believe that reflective contemplation is one of the X factors of the shift from reactive to creative leadership. Years ago, I used to guide whitewater rafting trips. I was running the wilderness activities program at a summer camp, and I used to take these kids down to a minor whitewater river. Don't think the Grand Canyon, but it was real whitewater, and it could be scary at times. And we would, before we got to each section of rapids in the river, we would always pull out onto the side of the river, and everybody would hop out of their rafts, and we'd go down the shore and scout the rapid. And together we would collaboratively figure out what's the best way to get through this rapid. You gotta go miss those hydraulics that are spinning like washing machine, washing the water back upstream, these holes, and you got to hit the standing waves hard and then miss that rock and so forth. And we'd get a plan every time for that particular set of rapids, and we'd go back and get in the boats. And I would go down first as the leader of the group, and I would go right into the middle of the rapids and find a giant rock that was there. And behind the rock would always be this calm space, this eddy of still water. And I'd pull my raft into it. And then I'd hop out and get up on the rock. And I'd put out my throw ropes, my safety ropes. And then I'd look upriver and I'd signal them to start coming into the rapid. And I'd watch their faces. And they had a plan. And they had a strategy. And they knew what they were going to do. And I swear every single time, literally, when they got into the white water, as soon as the bow of their boat started to get swished around by all the waves and so forth, they lost their heads completely. They completely forgot what they were doing. They'd start paddling in every direction. They'd be screaming at each other. A paddle or two would fly out of the boat and get lost in the water. Somebody would roll off the raft and splash into the water. And then they'd sort of wash down through the rapids. Fortunately, nobody was ever really seriously injured. And we'd get to the calm spot of water afterwards, and everybody would put things back in the boat, and they'd all look at each other like, man, we almost died back there. Let's do that again. And all day long, that was the activity, right? And to me, that was one of my first exposures to what happens to people who have a good plan when they find themselves in the midst of whitewater, VUCA. So we're living in a world of permanent whitewater right now. And to be vulnerably honest, we were talking about this a little bit before the call, I'm frequently alternating between deep grief for the suffering in the world that feels crushing to me, terrifying. And on the other hand, light-filled hope for the long-term future of humanity and civilization. I have both of these that I'm holding simultaneously. And it feels sometimes like I'm being tossed around in a whitewater river, and it can be exhilarating and it can be exhausting and depressing. I'm sure you're there too. If you're awake, you're there. I find myself swearing more than ever before in my life. It's like, who are you? So everything about this VUCA world is pressurized to lock us into our reactive, play not to lose habits that keep us maybe from drowning in the complexity. As Bob Anderson used to say, we're all running as if the bullet has left the gun and we're trying not to get hit in the back. It's high stress, it's cortisol, it's norepinephrine, it's a whole cocktail of stress hormones. And for those of you who know polyvagal theory, we're talking about a state of continuous dysregulation. So in order to shift out of that mindset, those ingrained patterns of psychological survival, we need to learn disciplines and practices that'll support us as we learn to develop a more spacious, wiser, peaceful perspective. So it can help our leaders to learn how to find a place of rest in the midst of the frantic demands and pace of modern corporate life, if they can learn some of these contemplative practices. Okay, so there's your few thoughts to set the stage. I'd like to do something a little more experiential here as a way of kind of dropping us in to a contemplative practice, and then asking you to share some of yours. We're going to do a poll after this. But what I'd like to invite you to do is to get comfortable in your chair. You may want to sit up straight. You may want to put both feet flat on the floor. If you've got your iPhone right next to you and stuff's coming in and dinging, you may want to just flip that over and turn it off. I'm going to read you a poem. And this poem by Judy Brown, an American poet, is you'll see very quickly, it's a metaphorical description of how to build a fire that in many ways stands for how to build a life that is sustainable, is not jammed with high stress, reactive triggers, and gives us room to breathe. So I'll read it twice. And I'd like you to notice what lands for you. As I read this poem, what do you sort of feel a little bit of a catch when you hear, or a longing, some kind of internal resonance. Fire. What makes a fire burn is space between the logs, a breathing space. Too much of a good thing. Too many logs, packed in too tight, can douse the flames almost as surely as a pail of water would. So building fires requires attention to the spaces in between as much as to the wood. When we're able to build open spaces in the same way we've learned to pile on the logs, we can see how it is fuel and the absence of the fuel together that make fire possible. We only need to lay a log lightly from time to time. A fire grows simply because the space is there with openings in which the flame that knows just how it wants to burn can find its way. What makes a fire burn is space between the logs, a breathing space. Too much of a good thing, too many logs packed in too tightly can douse the flames almost as surely as a pail of water would. So building fires requires attention to the spaces in between as much as to the wood. When we're able to build open spaces in the same way we've learned to pile on the logs, then we can come to see how it is fuel and absence of the fuel together that make fire possible. We only need to lay a log lightly from time to time. A fire grows simply because the space is there, with openings in which the flame that knows just how it wants to burn can find its way. I'm curious, I'd love to have anyone who would like to come off mute and just say, yeah, this line or that line or this idea resonated with me. Bring
I like
yourself
the
in.
very first line.
What makes a fire burn is space between the logs.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lorena.
I'm struck by the action, absence of action, thought, absence of thought, just like that duality as a sort of the contemplation of different kinds of spaces between.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Yael.
Yes, I'd like to say the space is how the oxygen gets in.
Yeah. The source of life in a way for the fire, yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, and the fire itself, I've always held that as I've read that poem as our own life force. It knows just how it wants to burn. We just need to create enough space for it to find its way through our life.
There are some great comments too in the chat, Dave, of people calling out lines.
Dave, I was struck by the line that talks about adding more logs can actually snuff out the fire.
Yeah. Yeah. How about we don't do any more back-to-back meetings, William? How about that? How about we give ourselves a bit of space in between all of our meetings to metabolize what we've just experienced and to become wise about it before we jump into the next meeting and forego the chance to learn from where we've just been and forego the chance to be fully present. All of that
we tend to stack on more and more things every day, right?
We do, absolutely.
And we lose focus, we lose energy, we lose, what's really important.
Yeah.
Right?
All the way, Millie. Go, 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 go.
Yeah. Go is, yeah. There may be times in our lives when that kind of energy is more available to us with less ultimate cost, younger years, when we're building the container, we're filling it up, we're achieving new things, we're learning a lot of stuff, we're handling many things as we build a household and perhaps have kids. We're involved in lots of different projects and so forth. And then there's a time when we crest the top of that curve where we start to realize, oh, there's opportunities to give back everything that we've invested in and to understand it at a higher order. And it's in those moments when we start to get a glimpse into that where these contemplative practices begin to come online with a little more energy and presence. And so we've got a poll here that we'd like to put in the chat. Do you have what you might call a contemplative practice? And this is a two-part question. So the first one is you can answer no or yes. And so let's just see what we get in this one. And then the second part is if you answered yes, we've got a list of just a small list of contemplative practices, and maybe you can check the ones that you do so we can see where we are. So currently it looks like about a half of you or a third of you have more or have contemplative practices, a third more, than don't. It's really encouraging to see so many of you have that.
Dave, while folks are filling in that poll, I just wanted to call out a comment by Manuel in the chat talking about how it says, my team created a rule within Outlook to auto book 15 minutes before and after meetings to avoid adding more logs. It has been amazing.
Way to go. I think some of this, the structural things are really important in terms of an organizational culture and process. Look, I've got a slide way in the deck that I put to sleep, actually. I may get it out later. I don't know. That is Ken Wilber's 4 quadrants, internal, external, individual, organizational, and how contemplation practices and structures might sort of shape us all more easily toward having a sense of presence in this moment. So we'll see if we get there, but that would fit really right in the organizational external. Great. Let's see the second question and see where we end up with the types of contemplative practices. Okay. So, pick up to 3 that you have done or do. And I'm very curious about this, actually, just to see what are you finding provides for you that place of stability internally, that place of rest in the midst of the chaos, the rock in the middle of the rapids that I stood on when I watched everybody go through. Many votes for nature immersion coming up, meditation or sitting, solitude, journaling, mindfulness while in action. Brother Lawrence, a guy who wrote in the 14th century about mindfulness in action from a Christian perspective, was a monk in a monastery, and he was thought to be a little dull. So they put him in the kitchen to do KP, to do kitchen cleanup and, peel the carrots and stuff. And he made every action that he did, from taking out the trash to peeling the carrots to stirring the soup to mopping the floor, contemplative. And he was so present with what he was doing that the older monks begged him to write up what he was doing. And that's what became the very tiny but really fascinating book called Practicing the Presence of God while peeling carrots. Breath work, great. Thank you, guys. That's wonderful to hear. Okay, you can take that off the screen. Let me just give you a little bit of definitional stuff around contemplative practices. Seeing deeply, I think that's where most people who are practicers of contemplation would say that's what it really is. Parker Palmer, the function of contemplation in all its forms is to penetrate illusion and help us touch reality. And one of my mentors, Richard Rohr, contemplation is a long, loving gaze into the heart of reality. So essentially, it's a way of seeing. These are practices which open to us a broader aperture so that we can take in more variables with less judgment. and see things as they are rather than how we wish them to be. And then, this is as pretty much every spiritual tradition has said, whenever we're looking out at the world and we're not seeing it as it is, but we're trying to force it into something we wish it was, that's the source of all of our suffering. Not holding current reality just as it is. We may long for a better current reality, but to be able to see it with compassion and kindness is what contemplation enables us to do. Here's just a quick tour of some contemplative practices. And as I mentioned, some of these, it may be that some of you who said, nope, don't have a contemplative practice may actually go, oh, wait a minute, I do that. So perhaps you do. Under mindfulness and meditation, this is always the category that people think of first. You got breath awareness meditations, you've got body scanning, where you might, notice what's going on in your body. Kind of, am I fully present? Can I scan from my head to my toe to notice where am I distracted or tense, and can I let that go? Mindful pauses between meetings, 1 to 3 minutes, 1 minute of breathing. Those things reset our attention. Or, loving kindness practice. Just to be always, you're going to get a cup of coffee or driving down a road or seeing a colleague and just wishing them the best in your heart, generating goodwill toward them. One of mine that I spend every day in the morning doing some of is centering prayer or centering meditation. You could call it contemplative sitting. And it's sitting in stillness and noticing the space between the thoughts that offers a little bit of a brief portal into a deeper awareness. And gradually, as I let go of every thought that pops up without thinking it, that's interesting, isn't it? Thinking without thinking, but noticing the thought and just not entertaining it or dwelling on it, the space between those thoughts starts to get bigger and bigger. And that deeper awareness begins to get more solid and stable. So that's mindfulness and meditation. Reflective journaling, that might be stream of consciousness stuff that you do in the morning, just writing to clear your mental clutter. Gratitude journaling, maybe you've done some of that. Inquiry journaling, when you get questions about leadership and life that are big ones and you don't want to lose them, just to begin to start write the question and then just start free-flowing answers to them. Or perhaps end-of-day reflection. A lot of people will sit down at the end of the day and just say, how did that go? What did I learn? Who am I today? Nature-based practices, just going for slow walks in nature, or having a sit spot somewhere in nature. I have a log that I sit on that's on a path near the river, the Cuyahoga River that's right near here, that looks over a cut in the river. It's a brown, muddy, boring river, but it's beautiful to sit there and just listen to the birds and watch the leaves and the light on the trees and begin to see those patterns. And I just settle in those moments. It doesn't take long. Nature sketching, photography, those are nature-based practices. Somatic and movement practices. We're talking about yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong, mindful stretching, or physical labor. Like the monasteries at all times, in all traditions, would spend time in meditation and spend time in hard labor, physical labor, and spend time sleeping and eating. Those were kind of the 3 big buckets of life. Exercise, for me, cycling is a meditative experience. I just drop in and I forget everything and I feel clear and clean by the time I arrive home. Contemplative reading and listening. There weren't as many of you who said anything about this. That's like Lectio Divina is just, like we read the poem. That was Lectio Divina. Slow reading, letting stuff sort of sink into you, or deep listening to music where you put on great headphones or listen to great speakers and you just, for a few minutes, there's nothing but the music. In fact, you even disappear in your own consciousness. It's just the music. Silence and solitude. How about a technology fast, anyone? Or mini retreats, just a half day, for silent work or for walking or resting. Daily quiet times of 10, 20 minutes when there's no agenda or input. Weekly rest days. I have been more conscious of this in the past than I am now. But I used to take a Sabbath, which would be a day in which I didn't do anything I didn't want to do. I might work hard at something, but I chose it. I didn't feel like I had to. And sometimes I would just sort of go through the day with no agenda at all. Lastly, community relationship practices, council circles, Sort of like the Quakers, we'd sit in a circle and share silence until somebody feels like they've got something to say, and they would speak it mindfully. Or I've had for many years what you would think of as a contemplative companionship or coaching, spiritual direction from my tradition, but guided reflection with a trusted listener. So these are all contemplative practices, and I think it's important to name them as we continue our conversation here, so that you get a sense of what those are. And as I've probably already mentioned, my core argument around leadership here is that when a leader adopts one or two or more contemplative practices, there's a space of rest that is often very quickly discovered, in which they're able to see a broader and deeper meaning of the swirl of craziness around them, the permanent white water. They're beginning to see patterns and understanding how to intervene from a leadership perspective in that chaotic or near chaotic VUCA system. It's like discovering that high and dry rock in the middle of the whitewater rapids that you can get up on and take a breather and look around and notice what's happening. That place. It's always been inside of us. This is one of my hopeful realizations, is that it's always there, though it's covered up by busyness, obsessive thinking. But when we can access that which is already there, we came into this world with that calm, clear space in us. We get a broader perspective. We get increased well-being, openness to new possibilities and vision, which can inspire the best in others and in our organizations. And we can let go of this playing not to lose fear that drove us so hard when we were in our reactive phase of leading. And we can instead consciously choose to create what matters most now and in the future for our organization, our customers, our employees. I hope that makes sense. I hope this is compelling. Before I stop for questions or comments, let me give you 3 premises that this argument is based on. I was really trying, as I prepared for this, to think through what is it that gives me hope about this life? Because there are times, and I've got a friend right now and a colleague who is in deep emotional and physical crisis. As of Monday, something cracked. And this person has been overwhelmed by the amount of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, that is so drowning them that they just said no and pulled the plug on everything this week. It's a dramatic step to take. And you think, well, how can you have hope when that's happening all over the place, particularly with some of the younger generations as they're trying to understand their place in this world and what's life all about? So as I thought through my underlying premises in this core argument, my first one, which I do deeply believe, is that we naturally expand in awareness, in perspective as we evolve. This is the nature of being human. It's built into us. It will happen unless we block it, unless trauma or something else gets in the way, distraction, too much busyness, too many logs on the fire. Otherwise, we will expand. It's core to who we are to move in this direction of higher orders of conscious awareness. Premise 2, though, is that organizational life commonly sabotages premise 1. So VUCA and our compulsive organization demands to raise the bar, do more with less, et cetera, create conditions for the reactive mind to go into overdrive, and it sends leaders into overwhelm. The stress response constricts our ability to see what's really happening around us. It lessens our ability to be fully present as leaders. And it shuts down growth and reflection and the integration of learning. And frankly, these organization demands are not going to stop. I mean, that may be depressing. We're gonna run our planet and our society into the ground unless we can learn a better way. And then the third premise is that our interior life is the path out of the craziness. So do not look outside yourself for the peace and the calm you desire. It's not there, and it won't be. Our longed for stillness is inside of each of us. The purposeful cultivation of stillness and silence and spaciousness within us, which think of that as your interior life, can uncover a place, a stable place of restful awareness in our depths, from which we can find a deepening clarity of perspective and purpose in mind and heart. So the punchline is that the key leadership practice needed today is contemplation. Now, I'm aware we're at about 10 minutes, 12 minutes till the end of the hour. I've got so much more I want to share, but I want to open the conversation up to you. So come off mute. Raise your hand, do whatever you'd like to do to join in with, or to say yes, but to my thinking, to share your particular perspective on this and what you do with leaders to help them create space between their logs so that they can be more fully present.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Mariano.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Contemplating fire, just the fact that you can set aside some time to contemplate nature and fire itself. It's like contemplating someone in your team or the team itself or your organization. We have to be able to do that. We have to be able to find the time just to see what nature and the circumstances around us tell us.
Yeah.
You know, we have to be more listening than willing to, as you were saying before, you know, just giving directives or organizing things or getting things done. So I thought the whole approach is fantastic, in the sense that all in all, we need that silence. We need that time to contemplate and let others and other things talk to us.
Yeah.
And be able to reflect that. And as you were saying, you know, the wisdom and the knowledge that you can really perceive, that the VUCA world is not allowing us. As you were saying, you know, the world is going in one direction and it's not good. And who's realizing that? Who's really, you know, contemplating?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for
You're very welcome. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I think nature has so much to teach us in terms of pace and integration of ecosystems and life, and it just works, you know? And so since the Industrial Revolution, we have been disconnected from nature. We're in a nature deficit disordered state. And we think if we can match the pace of the machines, which was the initial, you know, in some ways, this is why public schools in the United States were formed to begin with, was to get people to show up to the factory on time and learn how to do production. And now we think, well, if we can run our machines with no preventive maintenance, we can also run people that way. So let's just crank, people are just means to an end. And I think nature has a different story to tell. So thank you, Mariano. Yes, iPhone 129. Hi.
Hi, that's Barbara. I still haven't figured out how to
It's okay,
change
Barbara.
that. Hey, first, thanks. What you and Bob and the rest are doing. This is next level for the new Earth, I think, for our leaders. But I was thinking about the log analogy and Patrick Lencioni's death by meeting, and sort of how that kind of brings the back-to-back meeting, you know, idea and the death of organizations through these practices to kind of another level. And it would be kind of cool to see, you know, edit, second edition of that, his approach, but looking at it from your perspective, that the back-to-back meeting, and my clients, I mean, it's bad, and it's just an accepted practice, right? It's an accepted way of, as an example of all these other things, like you're saying, the VUCA approach and piling on more logs, and the way we do leadership.
Oh my gosh, yes, yes. I think it is. It's one of the next frontiers for us, frankly. Our research at Leadership Circle has been, we've looked at the reactive creative shift forever because almost 90% of leaders are in that shift for most of their career. So we've got 70% of leaders that somewhat kind of plateau or have their center of gravity at the reactive. And then 20% that have moved into the creative, but we all have both. And now we've been studying the integral and the need for that, which is the ability to embrace not only the fact that I'm this creative leader, but also that I still have my reactive in me, and I still have my egocentric, my little Dave who thinks he's the center of the universe in me, and I can welcome them all, which gives me a sense of kindness and compassion and full presence with myself that then I can give to everybody else. If I can't do it with myself first, I have a difficult time. And so our research is saying that high creative integral leaders are what the world is needing now. And that involves a level of leadership presence, personal presence that is, if you looked at it from a quantum vibrational point of view, is at a higher frequency than earlier ways of showing up in the world. And the good news is, and this is something that, in the Unity Academy at Leadership Circle, we study, is that higher order frequencies will entrain lower order frequencies up. They lift those frequencies. So to the degree that us as practitioners or leaders show up in a grounded, present way with love in our hearts, we end up shifting the field around us and in the organization. It sounds mystical and woo-woo and really bending spoons. It's not. It's physics.
No, I mean, the studies show that the more coherent field will prevail, right? So it'll
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Let me share this one slide with you before we come up on top of the hour. And by the way, I have a contemplative meditation to do with anybody who would like to hang out after the top of the hour. If you can stay on for another 10 minutes, we're just going to sit with each other. I'm going to take us through some thoughts, and then we're going to sit in silence for a few minutes. So if that would be useful to you before you go to your next meeting, Yael, I see don't put your hand down. I just want to highlight some of these things on the slide right now. Can you guys see this contemplation and leadership slide? Someone say yes.
Yeah, the slide is sharing.
Okay, good. So think about this. Contemplation slows time. It literally, when we're fully present, time will slow. Our experience of time slows. And Einstein said, what else is there but your experience of time? Time itself doesn't exist. So time slows, which gives inspiration and vision room to grow. We can't do it if we're racing from meeting to meeting, if we're running like a chicken with our head cut off. Contemplation will ground vision and hope and possibility in reality too. So we're not just pointing to, unicorns and fairies in the trees. We're actually grounding what we're trying to create in reality. Contemplation shifts focus from control, I've got to force things to be the way I want them to be, to trust in the system and trust in those around me. It's a much more of a pull toward vision way of showing up. Contemplation protects creative leadership from burnout. So as you stay grounded and as you have enough space between your logs, it's less likely that you will fry to a crisp slowly until you have to leave and go start your vineyard or whatever it is you need to do. Don't save it all up till the end. It's like every day. And then lastly, contemplation cultivates hope that is stubborn rather than naive. So it creates the inner spaciousness where hope can be realistic and resilient and deeply rooted. And in turn, it fuels the will to keep returning, hope does, to contemplation. Now, check this out. This is the last thing I'll share. There was a study, I don't know, many of you probably saw it, that Gallup put out this year. That's every year they'll ask the question, what do people want from their leaders? What followers want is what they call it. This is 2025's results. They got responses, over 72,000 responses from across 52 countries, so pretty well validated. This blew me away. 56% of all the respondents said they're looking for hope. 56%. They've never had a single item like that show up with that strength. 33% said, I want to be trusted and I want to know I can trust you. I want to feel like we're in a solid, stable relationship and we've got each other's backs. 7% were looking for compassion. 4% were looking for stability. That's good news because there ain't none. But I think that's wise in that we know somehow that if we have hope and if we have trust in our cultures of our organizations, that we can pretty much get through any circumstances of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. This is a wonderful report to read. By the way, this is just a punchline from the report. Just go to Gallup 2025, What Followers Want, and you can download, like, it's a 70-page report, and it really breaks it down by country, et cetera, et cetera. But think about this. They're looking to our clients and they're looking to you as leaders to be a source of hope. Where are you sourcing your hope? Do you have enough space in your life that hope can rise up so that people can bring their best self to every situation? Okay. Yeah. Am I saying your name right? Yeah. Is it Yael?
Yael, yes. Hi.
Yael, yes. So you've got the final question.
Well, I don't know if maybe the time is a little restricted, but I'm just thinking about the assault on like collective sense making in our world right now, and sort of all of the assault on reliable information and kind of collective resistance and things like that. And I feel a lot of this work of contemplation sort of sits within the individual, who then becomes a drop of water, who maybe kind of ripples out. And I wonder if you could say something about our way of working, with this tool, potentially with the leadership circle tool, but more so the underlying philosophies around how to change the system versus the individual, and how to bring collective contemplation to bear on changing the system. And maybe you've got an experience where you've seen it move into more of a collective within an organization, as opposed to these sort of individuals who sort of get it and then are bearing this intense responsibility to try to help others find the value in that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What a fabulous question that is. Are you going to be able to stick around? Yeah. Okay. It'd be fun to have more of a conversation about what you're bringing up then, but I want to give us a chance to kind of officially close this off, and then we can have the after session. We can talk a bit about that, do a quick contemplative sit, and that way we can release everybody who really does have to go because they scheduled back-to-backs.
Thank you.
I'm teasing you guys.
Thank you, Dave. That's perfect. We have gone just a little tiny bit over time, but to wrap up the main presentation and the main conversation here, I do just want to say, if you want to explore this more or want to see if there are ways to help the leaders that you work with find space for contemplation and find balance, we invite you to start a conversation with Leadership Circle. You're welcome to put yes in the chat and we can reach out to you directly, or when it's time for you, check out our contact page on the website and you can reach out when you're ready. In the meantime, we do want to ask you and invite you to join us next month. We have a great conversation planned around Pulse and the Leadership Circle profile, and really finding leadership change that's personal, practical, and measurable over time. That's coming November 19th. So watch your inbox and social media channels, the Leadership Circle social media accounts for information about that. And to finally wrap us up, before we enter into Dave's kind of special guided meditation practice, I just want to say on behalf of Leadership Circle and on behalf of Dave Schrader, I'm Sarah, saying thank you so much for joining us today for this fantastic conversation, for your contributions in the chat and your questions that you read out. We really appreciate you spending this time with us. Take care, and we will see you next month.
Bye-bye for now.
We'll give folks maybe just a minute or two to hop off if they need to, so we can kind of settle into the group who will stay on, Dave, for your next activity.
Yes, good, great. Well, Yael, let me just take a stab at sort of freewheeling a little bit around your question, and stop me if you think I've veered off and I'm not answering your question anymore. There's so much you surfaced there. Margaret Mead, the great sociologist, you've probably heard this quote. Right? Never doubt the power of a small group of committed individuals to change the world. Indeed, that's all that ever has.
Mm-hmm.
I love that because, she voiced that based just simply on her observations of what it takes to transform systems. A small group of committed individuals. And there have been people who've studied, how small a group is that actually, Do we need 3% of a social system to be committed to a particular idea? Do we need 12%? I've heard all these numbers. Oops, I'm sorry. The good news is it's less than we think. It really is. It's less than we think. And I think we know more about why that is now, too. We were touching a little bit on that just a minute ago when we talked about kind of vibrational frequencies of our individual presences. As there's a committed vision, a group of people committed to a particular vision of, say, our organization culture or the direction of our organization, even in the face of a lot of headwinds and entrenched ways of being, that the energy and the frequency of the energy of that committed group of individuals can ripple through a system in ways that actually turn out to be like the butterfly effect.
Mm-hmm.
That idea that a butterfly that flaps its wings in Tokyo can somehow 2 weeks later cause a storm to happen in New York. We don't know. And I think that, I've learned to trust that, especially as I've thought about what's the significance of my life and the work that I've done. In some of my client systems, I've been able to see incredible change. And in others, I've worked my butt off and seen nothing. And I think, was that a waste? The answer I'm holding now is no, actually. I just haven't seen it. I just can't see what other systems began to shift because I showed up faithfully to, my vision. Yeah. So I think we have to have a bit of faith. We have to trust physics. We have to trust social science, and not lose heart. Not lose heart. And I'm telling myself this every day as I read the New York Times. Yes. Other question at iPhone 129. Barbara.
I just wanted to add in, and I don't remember the source of this and what science it was based on. I mean, we know, unified field theory and all that, but to Yael's point that I think there is something about where one person who raises their frequency significantly has at that invisible frequency level an impact on an incredible number of other people just at that level that we don't see. So, to your point about not seeing it on the surface because, behavioral is dense. It's, the physical, what we're witnessing. But then at that energetic level, there's so much more going on. And some study anyway. So, it's happening. It's just you're not seeing it.
Thank you. That's really good affirmation. And I remember part of your question, Yael, was about the LCP as well. And so as we begin in individuals and as organizations begin to get feedback through the Leadership Circle profile on the degree and the flavors of their reactive structures individually and collectively, and their creative structures and mindset individually and collectively, that awareness in and of itself, I think, creates an upward pull from the reactive into the creative. just having words to describe self-authoring, for instance, in the creative. When you talk to almost everybody and say, are you authoring your own life? Are you writing the story of your life, or are you simply reading the script that you've been handed by your organization? You can, if they're not actively in the creative trying to pursue what matters to them in their life and their leadership, you can hear the longing in their answer too. I really want to be. So there's that upward pull. That's that we will grow unless it's blocked, right? And so creative leaders who are at the creative level and the integral level in organizations have a big responsibility to try and shape the culture in ways that remove the barriers to people claiming their own creative nature. Hierarchy in all of its reified forms can block people from seeing outside the box of their job description.
Mm.
When their soul says, that's pretty darn small for me. And so, more organic organizational forms, more fluid structures, and agility built into the culture and the organization, self-forming teams, all those sorts of things that Frederick Laloux talks about in his book are really openers for that individual and collective growth to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we could say a lot more. So, Wanda, how about last comment or question, and then we'll do our quick sit together.
It's just a simple comment. I had the privilege of going to Richard Rohr's Center for Action Contemplation. They had a conference this past weekend called Revision, and it was on bringing contemplation. And the thing that just struck me was when you just talked about the vibrational energy of folks really focusing their minds on creating space. That's what really happened at that conference. And I just have something I jotted down, and it said, when we all sit together, that we can fall in love with love, and love does a work in the world. And so we can ask ourselves that question, what does love require of me?
Oh.
So it just fit for what you were saying, Dave. It was just beautiful.
Thank you, Wanda. That is so beautiful. I know exactly that experience there. I spent 2 years in the living school with Center for Action and Contemplation. And I remember my first group meditation experience with 600 people in a ballroom where we sat in absolute silence for 20 minutes. I thought, I'll never make it through. And then about 10 minutes into it, there was a power that settled in the room that was bigger than all of us. And it held us all. And I got one of my first really, really deep tastes of what it means to be together. So in that level of awareness. And so this is a perfect tee up for us sitting together. By the way, I will point you to a book that this particular little meditation I am about to read while we're sitting comes from. It's called I don't think I have a copy here. The Contemplative Leader by Patrick. Patrick, I'm sorry, I can't remember your last name. By Patrick. It just came out about 2 years ago. And it's a wonderful, wonderful overview. So if you're curious about more, read about it there. You can also read about it in an indirect but very powerfully aligned way in Mastering Leadership, which is the book that Bob Anderson and Bill Adams wrote, our first book. And then in Scaling Leadership, the second book we put out, there's also lots of inferences to what it means to be fully present with one another because of contemplative practices and how that scales in leadership. Okay, you guys ready to sit? Silence and stillness is all the traditions say that is absolutely the sine qua non. There's no parallel to that for opening up these deep, stable, witnessing places within us. And so as a practice to just sit with a group of people and be fully present to what's happening inside of us and drop in perhaps to those spaces in the cracks between the thoughts that arise and disappear and arise and disappear. So I want you to get comfortable in your chair, as we did initially. Feet on the ground. Close your eyes if that were. And I'm going to read this framing for you as if you were saying it to yourself. So I'm going to read it in the first person, and I'm reading it for all of us. So you'll hear the I in this. Then I'm going to ring a bell, and we'll sit for 3 minutes. That's all we'll do today. Although I'm delighted to meet with anyone and sit for longer at another point. Okay, a few deep breaths to begin. As I begin my contemplative sit, I take a few minutes to notice my posture. Becoming comfortable in my seat, I sit slightly forward so that my spine is no longer touching the back of the seat. I become aware of my feet touching the floor, grounding me in the present moment. I focus on my back and neck, allowing them to find their most aligned and neutral position. I remember that I'm not trying to achieve anything. There are no goals. I'm simply becoming aware of my presence in this moment. Noticing any distractions, thoughts, judgments, decisions, and ideas that cross my mind, and paying attention to any emotions that I feel. I choose to let go of all of these for now. Instead, I focus on my moment by moment experience of being present to what is, to both the expansiveness of this universe and to the sensations of my body in this seat, in this place, just here, right now. When I become distracted, frustrated, or confused, I consciously return to simply focusing on my breath, in and out. I know that deep presence is already within me, whether I'm aware of it or not. No reaching or striving is required. My only work is to be as present as I can be to myself, to this place, and to this moment right now. Be still and allow this moment to envelop you. Be still and allow this moment. Be still and allow. Be still. Be. Allow yourself to come on back. Open your eyes slowly. Be present to all these wonderful faces on the screen. In the midst of that, I had an upwelling of gratitude for you. I'm so glad you decided to tune in today. And even more than that, I'm so glad you're doing the work you're doing in the world. Really. The world needs you. The world needs us together to bring presence and love, to bring hope, trust. So we'll say goodbye for now. I hope our paths can cross again sometime down the road. Peace and every good thing to each of you on your way.